You ever notice how in baseball, after the draft, it's like those rookies just disappear for like years? I mean, it's so different from football and basketball where those top picks are playing right away. As someone who likes to, get the gist of things quickly, I bet that difference kind of stands out to you too, right?
Yeah, it's a really interesting contrast, and it sort of highlights this unique aspect of how Major League Baseball develops its players.
It's a whole different world. So, in this deep dive, we're going to unpack MLB's player development system, the famous farm system. We've been digging into some great stuff, really gets into the history, and more importantly, like why it works this way. Today, we want to figure out where this all began, how it stacks up against the way the NFL, NBA, even the NHL do things, and most importantly, why those baseball prospects often take what seems like forever to reach the big leagues. We might even unearth a few surprises along the way. So to kick things off, where did this whole farm system thing even come from?
Well, to really grasp it, we got to go back to the early 1900s. Back then, MLB teams faced this real challenge, figuring out how to find and develop new talent. Minor league teams, they were totally independent businesses. So if a major league team spotted a promising player, they had to actually buy his contract.
So it was like a free-for-all for young talent.
Exactly. And that's where this brilliant guy comes in, Branch Rickey of the St. Louis Cardinals. He had this pretty radical idea.
Radical, huh? How so?
He proposed the Cardinals should own and run their own minor league teams, like a whole network of them. His vision was to create this internal pipeline of talent that the Cardinals could develop themselves. And that's where the farm system, as we know it, really took root.
Interesting. So was it all about gaining an edge on the field from the get-go?
Actually, the first motivation was financial. Rickey figured it'd be cheaper to, grow their own players instead of getting into bidding wars for talent from these independent minor league clubs. So the Cardinals took the plunge in 1919, buying minor league teams in Houston and Fort Smith.
1919. That's going way back. And how did this bold move work out for the Cardinals?
Oh, it was a home run, no pun intended. Over the next few decades, the Cardinals built what some called an empire. By 1939, they controlled a whopping 32 minor league teams with, get this, 650 players. And here's the kicker. This steady stream of developing talent fueled an incredible run for them. They won 9 National League pennants by 1946.
9! That's a dynasty right there. So the farm system wasn't just about saving money, it was a blueprint for winning.
You got it. And there's more. The Cardinals also made serious cash by selling off players they developed but who didn't quite fit into their major league plans.
So it was like a talent factory that also turned a profit. Pretty smart.
Exactly. Plus, having all these young, hungry players in the same organization, it created this super competitive environment. They were all pushing to climb that ladder and make it to the majors. It was like natural selection, the best of the best rising to the top.
Sounds like they were constantly pushing each other to get better.
Yep. And Rickey, he had this great analogy for it. He said it was like letting players ripen on the vine in the minors until they were ready and valuable for the major leagues.
Ripen on the vine. I love that. So, did other teams see what the Cardinals were doing and jump on board?
Oh, you bet they did, and pretty quickly. They saw the Cardinals' success and realized, hey, this is a winning formula. Soon they were all setting up their own minor league systems, from rookie leagues all the way up to AAA. By the mid-20th century, the farm system was the way to develop players in baseball.
And I guess that's when the term farm system really stuck, because they were literally growing their own players.
Exactly. And that basic structure is still how it works today. Every MLB team has a bunch of affiliate teams, like a ladder that players climb to reach the majors. It's really interesting how different this is from, say, the NFL or the NBA, where college is the main pipeline for talent.
That's a great point. We'll dive into those comparisons soon. But first, the big question. Why does it take baseball players so darn long to make it through these minor league farms?
Well, it's not just about, old school tradition. It's baked into the sport itself and how baseball is structured, both on the field and business-wise. There are a few key reasons for this.
Okay, let's break it down. What's the first one?
First and foremost, it's all about the skills. Baseball, it's not just about being athletic. You need crazy precise skills. It's not enough to just be a great athlete. You got to be able to hit a 95-mile-per-hour fastball with movement on it, or throw a whole range of pitches with pinpoint accuracy. That's not easy.
No kidding. Hitting a tiny ball flying that fast with all that spin has got to be one of the toughest things in sports.
Absolutely. And to master that, to hit consistently or throw strikes exactly where you want them, It takes time and tons of practice. The jump from even the best college or high school teams to facing seasoned pros is huge.
So it's not like you can just pick up those skills overnight.
Nope. Even those top college players, like hitters and pitchers, they usually need 2 or 3 years in the minors, facing pro-level competition to really adjust and refine their game. Take guys like Albert Pujols or Jacob deGrom. They were amazing in college, but they still needed that minor league experience to become the superstars we know.
And those guys were already playing at a high level in college. High school players, they must face an even longer road.
Most of the time, yeah. It's not uncommon for a kid drafted out of high school to spend 3, 4, maybe even 5 years working their way up through the minors, riding those buses, playing in small towns, all to hone their skills. The minors, they're like a giant training ground. Players get to play almost every day, like 140 games a season, to really work on their swing, their pitching, and just learn the game inside and out.
It's like a long apprenticeship.
That's a great way to put it. It's all about seasoning. You rush a player to the majors before they're ready, and you can actually hurt their development, even mess with their confidence if they struggle. Like you were saying, in football or basketball, a top prospect can often make an impact right away just based on their athleticism, even if they're still raw. But baseball is different. It's so complex. It takes that time to really master the craft.
So skill development is key. What else plays into these long minor league stints?
Another big factor is physical maturity, especially when you think about the sheer number of games in an MLB season. We were just talking about how a lot of players get drafted super young, like 17, 18 years old, straight out of high school. They might have all the talent in the world, but their bodies are still developing. They're probably not ready for the grind of a 162-game season.
That's a brutal schedule.
It is. And the minors give those young guys time to grow, get stronger, and adjust to playing almost every day. Even college players in their early 20s, they might not be used to that kind of intensity and the constant travel. Compare that to the NFL with their 17 games or the NBA with 82. There's still long seasons, but there's more built-in rest time. Baseball, it's a marathon. You need a deep roster. And the minors are like a constant supply of backup players, ready to step in if someone gets hurt or isn't performing.
So the minors aren't just about developing stars. They're like an insurance policy for the major league team.
You got it. If a player in the majors gets injured or hits a slump, boom, you call up someone from the minors who's ready to go. You need that depth, and that's where the minors come in.
We've covered skills and the physical demands. What else contributes to this whole system?
It comes down to a kind of numbers game, finding quality out of quantity, as they say. The MLB draft, it's always been way longer than the NFL or NBA drafts. Teams pick a ton of players, even with the draft now at 20 rounds.
That's a lot of new players.
Right. And the truth is, most of them won't ever make it to the majors. MLB teams, they know this. Their strategy, going all the way back to Branch Rickey, is to cast a wide net. They want to see as many players as possible, increase those odds of finding that diamond in the rough, that hidden gem. Rickey believed in finding quality out of quantity. You sign and train a huge number of young guys, the chances of finding a few who become stars, those chances go way up.
So the minor leagues are like this giant filter.
Precisely.
Okay.
It's like baseball's version of survival of the fittest. Prospects compete, some get better or move up, some don't, and eventually only the most talented and dedicated make it to the top. It's way different from football or basketball where, like we talked about, those shorter drafts mean they expect almost every player they pick to contribute to the team at some point.
Baseball can be so unpredictable, too. You hear about those guys drafted way late who end up becoming superstars.
Totally. The perfect example, Mike Piazza, a Hall of Famer drafted in the 62nd round. That's crazy. It shows you can't always tell how a young player will turn out. That's why teams need this huge development system. It gives those players time to grow, mature, and sometimes even surprise everyone. This whole long game approach means, like you said earlier, that even those top draft picks, you might not hear about them for 3, 4, 5 years before they finally make their debut. It's totally different from the NFL and NBA where, boom, those top picks are playing right away.
It's like two completely different worlds. Okay, so the sheer number of players drafted and how unpredictable talent can be, those are big reasons. Are there any financial or organizational reasons for this big minor league system?
For sure. Think about it. The minor leaguers are a really cost-effective way for teams to develop talent. Minor leaguers, they don't make nearly as much as major leaguers. And even when they get called up, they're still under team control for a few years at a lower salary than they might get later on.
So it's like a way to get potential stars at a discount for a few years.
Exactly. It's completely different from the NBA, where those top picks sign huge guaranteed contracts right out of college. Plus, with their own farm teams, MLB clubs can make sure those players are being developed the way they want. The same coaching, training methods, even playing time strategies. They control everything. There's also the whole risk factor. What if a player gets hurt, like a pitcher needing Tommy John surgery? Or what if they just have a rough stretch? The minor leagues give those guys time to recover, work on their game, without affecting the major league team right away.
I remember reading something about how minor league teams benefit local communities too.
Oh, absolutely. Minor league baseball, it's a big part of those communities. Affordable entertainment, and fans get to feel connected to the big league club. It's not the main reason for the farm system, but it's a nice side benefit. So when you put it all together, the cost savings, the control over development, managing risk, even that community aspect, it makes sense why the minor leagues are so important in baseball. No wonder teams value them so much. And because of all this, it's almost unheard of for a player to go straight from the draft to the MLB. Since the draft started back in 1965, only about 24 players have done that. Baseball, it's definitely a slow and steady kind of game.
It really puts things in perspective. So we see this complex, multi-level system in baseball. How do other sports like the NFL, NBA, and even the NHL handle developing their players? Sounds like they have different approaches.
Yeah, totally different. Let's start with the NFL. They've never really had a minor league system run by the teams. They lean heavily on college football to produce players who are pretty much ready to go pro.
In college football here in the U.S., it's massive. It's almost like its own pro league with the huge fan base and the level of competition.
You're right, it's huge.
Yeah.
And the NFL has a rule. You can't be drafted until you've been out of high school for 3 years. So almost all those NFL rookies, they're coming straight from college, usually 21 or older. The top college programs, they have great coaches, top-notch facilities, and they play in front of huge crowds with a lot on the line. So by the time a player gets drafted, they've got experience playing under pressure, they're physically mature, and they're basically ready for the NFL. That's why in the NFL, rookies, especially first-round picks, they're expected to come in and contribute right away. You see it all the time. A hotshot quarterback or a dominant defender stepping right into a starting role. Teams need them to perform, and those drafted players are usually ready to go.
That's a huge difference from baseball, where, like we said, even a top pick might spend years in the minors.
It's a whole different world. The NFL does have practice squads, where teams can develop a few extra guys, and they've tried minor leagues in the past like NFL Europe, but nothing like baseball's farm system. The NFL, they get a huge benefit financially. College football is basically their free talent pipeline. They don't have to pay for it or run it. College football, it's their de facto minor leaguer, even though they don't control it. And that's a big reason why the NFL draft is such a big deal. Those guys are going to be on the field playing just a few months later. They developed in those Saturday college games.
So in the NFL, it's pretty much straight from campus to the pros. What about the NBA? They rely on college basketball too, right?
Yeah, the NBA also gets most of its players from college. But their own developmental league, the G League, it's getting bigger and more important. NBA players, they can be drafted younger than in the NFL, often 19 or 20. Sometimes they even go pro after just 1 year of college, the one and done thing. But even though they're young, those top basketball players, they usually have the athleticism and skills to make an impact in the NBA right away. Think about guys like LeBron James, who skipped college entirely, or more recently, Zion Williamson and Luka Doncic, who was already playing Pro Bowl overseas. They were all making big contributions as teenagers. Lottery picks in the NBA, they're almost always expected to be on the team right away, and many start or become key players in their first year.
So, like the NFL, they expect those top NBA draft picks to contribute right away.
Yep. For a long time, the NBA didn't really have a minor league system. Now there's the G League, and teams can send younger or less experienced guys there to get playing time and develop. But usually it's second-round picks, or guys who need more work who spend a lot of time in the G League. Most first-rounders, they stay with their NBA teams. It's not like baseball, where you have this long, multi-year development process. In the NBA, they learn and get better by playing in the NBA. Coaches give them more responsibility as they gain experience. The NBA, they have smaller rosters, like 12 to 15 players, and a star player can change everything in a game. So teams, they want to get their best young guys on the court as soon as possible. And there's the money, too. First-round picks get guaranteed contracts, so teams want to see them playing and making an impact. The G League is good for development, But it's not as important as the MLB farm system. Most NBA players go straight from the draft to playing in the NBA.
So NFL mostly relies on college, NBA does college and some G League. How about hockey? The NHL drafts young guys too, right?
They do, as young as 18. But it's not as common for those guys to go straight to the NHL and be stars right away. Hockey, it's like a mix of baseball's patience and the faster track we see in the NFL and NBA. A hockey player, after being drafted, they might play another year or two in junior leagues, like the Canadian major junior leagues or some amateur leagues. Some even go to college. Then, once they sign a pro contract, if they're not ready for the NHL, they'll probably play in the AHL, the American Hockey League. That's like AAA in baseball. Every NHL team has an AHL team where their prospects play.
So hockey does have a minor league system, but it sounds like the whole timeline for making it to the pros is different from baseball.
Exactly. In hockey, it usually takes less time to develop, and they have fewer levels compared to baseball's farm system. The AHL serves a similar purpose, but fewer players spend as much time there as they do in baseball's minors. And then you have those super talented hockey players like Connor McDavid or Sidney Crosby. They went straight to the NHL as teenagers and became stars right away. In hockey, it's not that unusual for a high draft pick to make the NHL roster within a year, especially if the team needs someone with their skills. But a lot of drafted players, it takes them a few years to develop, maybe bouncing between junior leagues, the AHL, and getting called up to the NHL for a bit. There's also this rule where some young players can stay in junior leagues until they're 20 before they can play in the AHL. That's to protect them, make sure they're not playing against older, tougher pros before they're ready. In terms of the AHL itself, it's smaller than baseball's minor leagues. Usually, each NHL team only has one main AHL affiliate. And the NHL draft, it's only 7 rounds, like the NFL draft. So hockey, it's got this idea of developing prospects. But the best players often reach the NHL pretty fast, similar to the NFL and NBA.
So as you wrap this up, why does baseball have this huge and often slow-moving minor league system, while in other sports, the top prospects are playing at the highest level right away?
In the end, it all comes down to the nature of each sport and how their development systems evolved over time. Baseball, they adopted the farm system pretty early on to save money and gain a competitive edge. Over time, it just made sense. Baseball's all about these really precise skills that take time to develop, and it's hard to tell which young players will pan out. So for them, having this huge pool of players and developing them slowly, it's the best way to go. Other sports like the NFL and NBA, they rely more on existing systems, mainly college sports. They figure those athletes are already pretty much physically ready and have the basic skills to play pro. Hockey somewhere in the middle, they have a minor league system, the AHL, but their best players often reach the NHL pretty quickly.
So for baseball fans, waiting for that hot prospect to finally make it to the majors, it takes patience and a long-term view.